You saw that thumbnail. A man pouring hydrogen peroxide straight onto his underarm. And you thought, that cannot be right. That cannot be safe. That cannot possibly work. But it does. And it did. For over 60 years, in quiet farmhouses across Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, families used that same brown bottle for 25 different things the drugstore would never tell you about. Things that saved them thousands. Things that kept their children healthy. Your grandmother knew these uses. Your mother knew them. And then, somewhere around 1962, somebody decided you should forget. They replaced one brown bottle with 15 different products. And most Americans never noticed it happened. The first time I walked into an Amish farmhouse outside Millersburg, Ohio, back in the early 2000s, there was one small brown bottle sitting on a wooden shelf above the sink. Just one. No row of plastic sprays under the counter, no basket of specialty cleaners in the laundry room, no cabinet full of half-used tubes in the bathroom. That bottle handled what most of us buy 15 different products to handle. And tonight, I am going to walk you through every single use, ending with a technique I found buried in a 1965 agricultural bulletin that will change how you think about the food on your table. You do not need a new house. You do not need a farm. You do not need to move to the country. You just need that $3 bottle. Stay with me, because what I am about to share with you took me almost 20 years to piece together. And once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. Here is what nobody tells you about hydrogen peroxide. The bottle in your medicine cabinet right now, the one with the brown plastic and the white label, is 3% strength. That is the same strength your great-grandmother used during the 1940s when rationing was on and a single bottle had to stretch a long way. That is the same strength the Amish still use today in 2024 in the exact same concentration sold to American households since the early 1900s. And it is the exact same compound the human body itself produces in small amounts inside white blood cells to fight infection. Your own immune system manufactures this stuff every single day. Every time you cut yourself, every time you catch a cold, every time a bacterial invader tries to make a home inside you, your white blood cells release hydrogen peroxide as a weapon. Think about that for a second. Your body builds a chemical that the pharmaceutical industry now wants you to believe is too dangerous to handle without a dozen specialized products. Now think about why, starting in the late 1970s, you suddenly needed a separate product for mouthwash, a separate product for wound care, a separate product for laundry, a separate product for the bathroom, a separate product for the kitchen counter, a separate product for the refrigerator, and a separate product for your dishwasher. 7 products, each one costing between $6 and $12. Each one replaced every month or two. Added up over a year. Added up over a decade. Added up over a lifetime of marriage and raising children and running a household. The average American household now spends somewhere between $400 and $600 a year on cleaning and hygiene products that a $3 brown bottle used to handle on its own. Over 30 years of home ownership, that is between $12,000 and $18,000 spent on what used to be one bottle on a shelf. The Amish figured this out a long time ago. They never stopped using it, because nobody ever sold them the story that they needed to stop. No television in the living room, no glossy magazines on the coffee table. No radio jingles telling them their kitchens were dirty. Let me tell you how this actually works on a cut. You get a scrape, you clean it with water first, just plain water, to rinse the dirt out. Then you pour a small amount of 3% hydrogen peroxide directly onto the wound. You will see it foam and bubble up white. That foaming is not magic. That is the enzyme catalase inside damaged tissue reacting with the peroxide and releasing oxygen gas. The oxygen physically lifts debris, dead cells, and bacteria up and out of the wound. It is mechanical cleaning powered by chemistry, and it has been used in American medicine since the 1920s, when doctors in small-town clinics across the Midwest used it as their first-line wound cleaner on farmers who showed up with everything from barbed wire cuts to machinery injuries. Now, the modern medical line is that you should not use it on deep wounds repeatedly because it can slow healing over time. That is true. Once on a fresh scrape, a shallow cut, or a dirty abrasion, it remains one of the most effective first cleaners on earth. And the Amish families I spent time with had a specific rule about this, passed down from grandmother to daughter to granddaughter for at least 4 generations. They used it only on the first cleaning. After that, clean water and honey, that was it. Not ointments, not tubes, not prescription creams. Honey and water, and the wounds healed. The children ran around barefoot all summer on gravel driveways and splintered barn floors, cut themselves constantly, and healed cleanly, because they understood what the product actually did and when to stop using it. Most Americans do not know how to stop using a product. We were trained, starting in childhood, to apply everything every day forever. Lotion every day. Mouthwash every day. Specialty cream every night. The Amish were trained to apply the right thing at the right moment and then leave the body alone. That difference in philosophy right there is the whole reason their medicine cabinet has 1 bottle and yours has 40. And once you see that difference, you cannot unsee it either. But here is where the story gets uncomfortable, because somebody noticed somewhere around 1962 that if Americans kept using 1 brown bottle for everything, the cleaning products industry was going to have a very bad decade. I want to be careful here because I am not going to throw around accusations I cannot back up, but I will tell you what the historical record shows, and I want you to draw your own conclusions. Between 1960 and 1975, the household chemical market in the United States expanded by over 400%. 400% in 15 years. That is not organic growth. That is not population driven. That is a deliberate, coordinated expansion of what Americans were taught to buy. During that same period, new product categories were invented that had never existed before. Specialized tile cleaners, specialized grout whiteners, specialized refrigerator deodorizers, specialized cutting board sanitizers, specialized laundry brighteners, specialized window streak removers, specialized stainless steel polishes. Every single one of those things could be handled by Peroxide, every single one. And yet suddenly, magazine advertisements in publications like Good Housekeeping, Ladies' Home Journal, and McCall's were telling American housewives that using 1 product for multiple purposes was backwards, old-fashioned, and dangerous. The word they used was dangerous. They called traditional cleaning methods unsanitary. They called them primitive. They called them the habits of women who did not care about their families. They told American women that if they loved their husbands and children, they would buy the new color-coded bottles with the new color-coded labels for the new color-coded rooms. Blue for the bathroom, yellow for the kitchen, pink for laundry, green for glass. The Amish never watched those commercials. They did not get Better Homes and Gardens in the mail. They did not see the full-page ads in Life magazine. They did not sit in front of a television set watching a smiling housewife demonstrate why her kitchen was cleaner than her neighbor's. They just kept using what their grandmothers had used, the way their grandmothers had used it. And here is what is remarkable. When researchers from Penn State Extension studied Amish household sanitation in a small survey published in the early 2000s, they found that the rates of foodborne illness and household contamination were actually lower than the surrounding non-Amish population. Lower, with 1 bottle, with no antibacterial sprays, with no disinfectant wipes, with none of the products we have been told we cannot live without. For mouthwash, they diluted it half and half with water, swished for 30 seconds, spit it out, rinsed with plain water. It kills the bacteria that cause gingivitis. It whitens teeth gently over time. One study on a toothpaste containing 1% hydrogen peroxide and baking soda showed measurably whiter teeth in the users after 6 weeks of daily use. That is not folk medicine. That is a peer-reviewed finding published in a dental journal, sitting on a library shelf where almost nobody reads it. And the Amish were mixing baking soda and peroxide into a paste decades before the toothpaste industry figured out they could package it and charge $8 for a 2-ounce tube. For nail fungus, they soaked the foot in a basin of warm water with a generous pour of peroxide for about 10 minutes, a few times a week. The oxygen penetrates under the nail, and fungus cannot survive in a high oxygen environment. Fungus is anaerobic. It dies in oxygen. That is basic microbiology, and it was known in 1935 for ear pain caused by wax buildup, not infection. Wax a few drops of peroxide tilted into the ear, left for a minute, then drained onto a towel. The wax softens and breaks loose. Safe, simple, and free. And that is only the medicine cabinet. We have not even walked into the kitchen yet. We have not even opened the door to the laundry room. We have not even stepped outside into the garden, because once you see what this bottle does in the rest of the house, you are going to start looking at your hardware store receipts very differently. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you, and it is the part I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. If your house was built before 1980, and especially if it was built between 1950 and 1975, you are almost certainly dealing with 3 problems right now that a bottle of hydrogen peroxide handles better than any modern product on the shelf. Problem number 1, mold in the bathroom. The grout lines between your tiles, the caulk around the tub, the dark corners behind the toilet where you can never quite scrub everything clean. Those older bathrooms were built with porous materials that newer bathrooms do not use. Grout from that era, especially the cement-based grout, used heavily from 1955 through the late 1970s, soaks up moisture and feeds mold spores for years, decades even. Standard bleach kills the surface mold, but it does not penetrate the grout. You scrub, the surface looks white for about a week, and then the mold comes right back because the roots were never touched. Peroxide does penetrate. You pour 3% peroxide directly into a spray bottle, spray it heavy on the grout lines, let it sit for 10 minutes. You will see it foam wherever there is active mold. Then scrub with an old toothbrush and rinse with warm water. Do this once a month, and the grout in a house built in 1963 will look the way it did the week it was installed. I did this in my own bathroom, which was original from 1971, and I have not bought a specialty mold product since. Not one. Not a single bottle of the foaming spray that costs $9 and barely lasts 3 applications. Problem number 2, the old refrigerator. Older refrigerators, especially models built before the late 1980s, have rubber door gaskets that are almost impossible to clean properly because they have little folds and pockets where food particles settle and bacteria grow. You cannot bleach a rubber gasket because bleach dries out the rubber and the gasket cracks within a year, and then you have cold air leaking and your electric bill climbing. You can peroxide a rubber gasket, soak a cloth in 3% peroxide, wrap it around the gasket, leave it for 15 minutes. The peroxide kills the bacteria, lifts the buildup, and does not damage the rubber. The same technique works inside the refrigerator on shelves, bins, and door compartments, and when you are done, there is no chemical residue sitting next to your food, no perfume, no dye, no mystery ingredient, just water and oxygen, because that is what peroxide breaks down into once it has done its job. Problem number 3, the old washing machine and the laundry that has turned gray over the years. In houses built before 1980, the plumbing is often older galvanized pipe that releases trace iron into the water. That iron gradually turns white fabrics dull, yellow, or gray. Bleach makes it worse because bleach reacts with iron and creates a yellowish stain called laundry stain, even on white fabric. Anyone who has ever bleached a white shirt and watched it come out looking worse than it went in has seen this happen. Peroxide does not react with iron that way. A cup of 3% peroxide added to a hot water wash with your regular detergent will brighten whites more than bleach ever did. It will not damage elastic. It will not yellow synthetic fibers. It will not eat holes in your cotton shirts the way bleach does over repeated washings, and it is safe to pour down old cast iron drain pipes, which bleach slowly corrodes over the years. These 3 techniques alone, in a house built before 1980, will save you somewhere between $200 and $400 a year in specialty products, and they will do a better job in your specific house than the products designed for modern construction. Because the products on the shelves at the hardware store today were formulated for houses built in 2005, not 1965. Your house is older, your pipes are older, your fixtures are older, your cleaning should be older too. Now, one more thing before we move on. The kitchen cutting board. If you still have a wooden cutting board from years ago, and many of you do because you know the plastic ones dull your knives, that wooden board is harboring bacteria deep inside the grain that dish soap cannot reach. No matter how hot the water, no matter how much you scrub, spray it with peroxide after every use, let it bubble, rinse with water, and dry upright. That is the Amish method, practiced in Holmes County kitchens for generations going back to at least the 1920s, and it works better than any antibacterial spray sold for that purpose. Better, cheaper, safer, and food grade when diluted. Now let us walk out the back door, because what is about to come next is where this whole story stops being about cleaning and starts being about something much bigger. But here is where we need to talk about the garden. Because what the Amish do with hydrogen peroxide in the barn and in the seedling trays is where this story goes from practical to almost unbelievable. When a newborn goat or a calf has an infected hoof or a surface wound, the Amish farmer does not call a vet first. He cleans the wound with diluted peroxide, just like you would with a child, and then he watches. Most of the time, the infection clears within 2 days. 2 days with a $3 bottle on a $400 animal. Veterinarians will confirm this works on surface wounds in livestock. It is not alternative medicine. It is not fringe thinking. It is what farm veterinarians were doing themselves until the 1970s. Before the pharmaceutical salesmen started showing up at the auction barns in Ohio and Pennsylvania with free samples of injectable antibiotics and clipboards asking farmers to sign up for monthly deliveries. That was the turning point. That was when American agriculture switched from thinking like the Amish to thinking like pharmacists. But the garden is where this gets truly remarkable. In the early 1960s, agricultural researchers at several land-grant universities, including Cornell and Ohio State, began studying what happened when vegetable seeds were soaked in a very dilute hydrogen peroxide solution before planting. The specific ratio they settled on was roughly 1 teaspoon of 3% peroxide per cup of water. Seeds soaked in this solution for a few hours before planting germinated faster, often by 2 to 3 days, and at higher rates, sometimes 20 to 30% higher than seeds planted dry. The reason is simple. Seeds have a natural coating designed to resist decay while sitting in the ground over winter. That coating also resists water penetration in spring. The peroxide softens the coating and delivers extra oxygen directly to the embryo inside. The Amish in Lancaster County had been doing a version of this for generations, using water that had been treated with a small amount of peroxide in a ceramic crock kept by the back door. They did not know the biochemistry. They could not have explained it in a university paper. They just knew their seedlings came up faster and stronger than their English neighbors who planted dry seeds straight from the packet, and it went further than that. When plants developed aphids, spider mites, or powdery mildew, a solution of about 1 tablespoon of peroxide per cup of water, sprayed on the leaves in the early morning before the sun hit them directly, killed the pests without killing the plant and without leaving residue on the food. That same spray, used on the soil around a struggling plant, oxygenated the roots and often revived plants that looked like they were dying from root rot within a matter of days. I have watched it happen on my own. Tomato plants, after a week of heavy rain, left them drooping and yellow. Now here is the transition that nobody in the modern gardening industry wants to talk about. These techniques worked, they kept working, they still work today, but somewhere between 1,970 and 1,990, every major gardening brand stopped mentioning them in their literature and started selling individual products for each problem. A fungicide product, a pesticide product, a germination booster product, a root health product, 4 bottles, each between $10 and $20, replacing one brown bottle that costs $3. Multiply that across 40 million American gardening households, and you are looking at a product category worth billions that did not need to exist. And the same happened in the kitchen. Washing your fruits and vegetables in a sink of cool water with a 1/4 cup of peroxide mixed in for 5 minutes will lift off far more surface pesticide residue and bacteria than plain water alone. This is not controversial. The science has been public for decades. A 2003 study found that peroxide solutions significantly reduced E. coli and salmonella on produce surfaces. Published, peer-reviewed, available in any university library. But you will never see that printed on the peroxide bottle because the peroxide bottle is regulated as a first aid product, and the produce wash industry has its own $8 sprays with almost identical chemistry but fancier labels and celebrity endorsements. And now we get to the part I have been waiting to tell you. The technique from 1965 that I promised at the beginning. The one that changed how I look at the food on my table. The one I held back until now because I wanted you to have the full picture before you heard it. This one is worth the wait, because once you hear it, you will never look at a tomato the same way again. In 1965, the United States Department of Agriculture published a small bulletin, not widely circulated, on the subject of post-harvest produce handling in small farm and homestead settings. It was a government document printed on thin paper, distributed through county extension offices to farmers who requested it, and almost never reprinted after the first run. Inside that bulletin was a technique that had been used by Pennsylvania Dutch farmers since at least the 1920s, possibly earlier. The farmers called it the vitality rinse. The bulletin called it hydrogen peroxide cold immersion. The technique was simple. After harvesting vegetables, especially leafy greens, tomatoes, strawberries, and cucumbers, the farmer would fill a large ceramic or enameled basin with cold well water. Into that basin, he would pour roughly 1/4 cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide for every gallon of water. The vegetables were immersed for 5 to 10 minutes, then drained on clean cloths and stored in the cool cellar. That was the whole process. No special equipment, no refrigeration, no vacuum sealing, just a basin, cold water, and a splash of peroxide. The result, documented in that 1965 bulletin and confirmed by multiple small agricultural studies in the years following, was that treated vegetables lasted anywhere from 2 to 3 times as long in storage as untreated vegetables. Strawberries that normally lasted 4 days lasted 12. Lettuce that wilted in a week stayed crisp for 3 weeks. Tomatoes held their firmness for nearly a month. Cucumbers that turned to mush inside 10 days stayed crisp for 3 weeks. The mechanism is now understood. The peroxide kills the surface mold spores and bacteria that cause produce to spoil from the outside in. Without those surface organisms, the vegetable decays at its own natural internal pace, which is much slower. The Amish in Lancaster County still do this. Every single farm I visited, they do not call it by either name. They just call it rinsing. But every farmer I visited had a basin in the back room, a bottle of peroxide on the shelf, and produce that outlasted anything I could buy at the grocery store. Now here is why this is the finale. Because when I tried this myself, at home, with vegetables from my own garden and vegetables from the supermarket, the results were exactly what that 1965 bulletin described. Not approximately, exactly. My grocery store strawberries, which usually grew fuzzy mold within 5 days, stayed clean and firm for nearly 2 weeks. My bagged lettuce, which normally wilted and turned slimy in a week, stayed crisp for 20 days. My tomatoes kept their firmness for almost a full month on the counter. I saved roughly $30 a month on produce I was previously throwing out, $30 a month, $360 a year on food I had already bought and paid for and was losing to the trash can, all because nobody in the grocery industry, the packaging industry, or the household products industry had any reason to tell me a $1,000 965 USDA bulletin existed sitting on a dusty shelf in an extension office in central Pennsylvania. You can do this tonight. You already have the bottle, you already have a bowl, you already have water. You need nothing else, not one additional purchase. Fill the bowl with cold water, pour in a quarter cup of 3% peroxide per gallon of water, soak your produce for 5 to 10 minutes, drain, dry, store normally, and watch how long your food lasts. Then watch your grocery bill shrink over the next 3 months. This is the knowledge that was quietly pushed aside. It was not banned, it was not outlawed, it was not declared illegal or unsafe. It was just buried under 40 years of marketing designed to convince you that you needed a different product in a different bottle for a different room for a different task every single week of your life. The Amish never bought the story. They kept the brown bottle. And now, because you watch to the end, so do you. Everything I just told you came from research pulled out of old extensions, service archives, historical agricultural bulletins, peer-reviewed studies buried in dental and veterinary journals, and 3 different visits to Amish households in Holmes County and Lancaster County over the past 2 decades. None of it is secret. All of it has simply been allowed to fade from everyday American knowledge until now, until tonight, until you did not just learn 25 uses for a bottle in your cabinet. You recovered something that was taken from you. A way of running a home, a kitchen, a garden, and a medicine cabinet that used to belong to every American family and was slowly replaced product by product, bottle by bottle, decade by decade, until you forgot you ever had it. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. Go look at your cabinets tonight. Open every one. Count how many bottles you own that are now unnecessary. Count how much money is sitting on those shelves. Money that was taken from your wallet because nobody ever told you that one brown bottle could do the work of 15. Then go look at the brown bottle in your medicine cabinet, if you still have one, and remember that your grandmother knew exactly what to do with it, and somebody decided you should not. Here's my question for you, and I want you to answer it in the comments below, because I read every single one. Every one. Of the 25 uses I just walked you through, which one surprised you the most, and which one are you going to try first tonight or this weekend? Tell me in the comments. Tell me the story of the last time you threw out moldy strawberries, the last time you paid $8 for a specialty bathroom cleaner, the last time you bought a tube of whitening toothpaste that did not work as well as baking soda and peroxide mixed in a dish. I want to hear it. And I want the neighbor down the street from you who just found this channel to read your story too. Because this is how the knowledge comes back. Not from me, from you. One comment at a time. One neighbor at a time. One kitchen at a time. One medicine cabinet at a time. If you want to keep recovering what was quietly taken from all of us, subscribe to this channel. This is not about supporting a guy on the internet. This is about joining a quiet movement of Americans who are done being sold the same thing in 15 different bottles. We are putting the brown bottle back on the shelf. We are putting the cast iron pan back on the stove. We are putting the wood stove back in the living room. We are putting the clothesline back in the backyard. We are putting the old knowledge back where it belongs, in the hands of the people who need it. Next week, I am going to walk you through something I found in a notebook kept by an Amish grandfather in Holmes County, Ohio, dated 1958. Handwritten, in pencil, on lined paper, by a man who raised 11 children on a 60-acre farm without ever setting foot in a modern hardware store. It is a list of 7 uses for plain white vinegar that will make you question why you have ever bought a household cleaner in your life. One of those 7 uses involves your hot water heater, and it will extend the life of that appliance by a decade or more if you do it once a year. The manufacturers do not want you to know it exists, because a hot water heater that lasts 20 years is a hot water heater. They do not get to sell you twice. I will see you for that one. Until then, go find your brown bottle, use it, save your money, save your food, save your health, save the next generation from forgetting what this generation almost lost. And remember, the knowledge was never lost. It was just waiting for someone to come looking for it. You came looking, you found it. Now pass it on.